Every morning in cities across the world, a time-honoured ritual begins: the daily commute. This video has been speeded up. The real motion of these cars looks like this. By 2035, it is estimated that 42% more cars will be added to our roads, and when that happens, our commute will look more like this. But there's a bigger problem here. Can you see it? Nearly every car in this video has just one occupant. It is estimated that 85% of car journeys in America involve just one person, the driver. 50% of journeys are for a distance of under 3 miles, or 6 kilometres. 80% are for a distance of less than 10 miles, or 20 kilometres. So why does this matter? 14% of global CO2 emissions are from road transport. In my country, Australia, 61% of those emissions are created by cars and light commercial vehicles. In 2016, that totalled 59 million tonnes of CO2 emissions. And CO2 emissions are not the only problem. In cities everywhere, the toxic fumes emitted by cars are responsible for causing respiratory illness, cardiovascular disease and cancer. Many believe that electric cars will solve this problem, but so far there has been low uptake due to the high upfront cost. Even with higher numbers, the benefits will be limited as long as fossil-fueled electricity is used for charging. So could it be that the solution to car emissions is in fact not a car? Let's take a look at the physics here. Oh, and if physics is not your thing, feel free to skip to the next section where everything is summarised. We will need to make some assumptions, so let's assume our average driver weighs 80 kilograms. For this exercise, I will assume the car weighs 1500 kilograms. So straight off the bat, we're moving a human around in a machine that is 20 times his weight. Our model commuter is driving a typical medium-sized passenger car, powered by a 120 kilowatt petroleum, or if you prefer, gasoline engine. In this example, the daily commute is 10 kilometres each way. The rush hour journey is slow and takes 30 minutes. During this time, the engine is running at an average 2000 RPM, producing 50 kilowatts at the wheels. Having made these assumptions, we are now able to estimate the energy used and the carbon emissions from this journey. I know you're going to say, but this will vary with the type of car and the way it is driven. And well, yes, that's true, but just stay with me on this, and you'll see these factors matter less than you may think. The net energy required for this journey can be calculated as follows: 50 kilowatts, the average engine power at the wheels, times 30 minutes, or 0.5 of 1 hour, which equals 25 kilowatt hours. Okay, so knowing this, how can we calculate the vehicle's emissions? Well, to do so, we need to know one other thing: the emissions factor of petrol or gasoline. Every fuel has an emissions factor, and for petrol, this value is 0.26 kilograms per kilowatt hour, meaning for every kilowatt hour produced by that fuel, there will be 0.26 kilograms of carbon emitted to the atmosphere. So the emissions from our car journey is 25 kilowatt hours times 0.26 divided by 0.3, or 21.6 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. Wait a minute, what's this 0.3 doing there? Well, you see, vehicles powered by internal combustion engines are notoriously inefficient at converting the embodied energy in their fuel to kinetic energy at the wheels. In fact, only 30% is translated into forward motion. So unfortunately, to produce our 25 kilowatt hours, we will consume 3 times that amount of stored fuel energy and consequently generate 3 times as much pollution. This is another good reason for going electric. Let's review what we now know about cars. For a typical commuter, the car's mass is 20 times greater than the driver's. For a typical cross-town commute, the car will emit 21.6 kilograms of carbon pollution. An interesting way to represent this would be to imagine a carbon man. In this case, the pollution emitted by his car, 21.6 kilograms, is roughly 1/4 of the man's weight, 80 kilograms. So we could show that as a man filled with 25% carbon. Now it's time to look at the electric scooter situation. So our driver still weighs 80 kilograms, however his vehicle now only weighs 15 kilograms. This means proportionately our driver is 84% of the total mass being moved. The rear scooter wheel is driven by a 1.5 kilowatt motor. To keep things simple, we will assume the distance and time taken to cover it is the same. Of course, a car can go faster than a scooter, but not in rush hour. So energy required to get to work equals 0.5 kilowatts times 0.5 hours, or 0.25 kilowatt hours. Now we need the emissions factor for electricity. This varies depending on the source, but let's assume the worst case, where the e-scooter is charged using 100% coal-fired power. Then the emissions factor is 0.9 kilograms per kilowatt hour. Unlike gasoline engines, electric motors are very efficient, with 90% of the onboard energy being converted to forward motion. Therefore, emissions from our electric scooter are 0.25 kilowatts times 0.9 kilograms per kilowatt hour divided by 0.9, or 0.25 kilograms. In other words, we have moved our man from home to work with 88 times less energy and just 1% of the emissions of a car. So now our carbon man would look like this. His carbon footprint is more like a carbon shadow and almost negligible.
When you make an assumption, you make an ass out of you and umption.
Okay, what about those assumptions? What if the car had a smaller engine? What if the car is a hybrid? What if the scooter has a bigger motor? What if our emission factors are out? Well, it turns out that the emissions outcome is not really sensitive to these factors. The main driver is the huge difference between the mass of the car relative to the mass of the scooter. In our model, that ratio is about 100 to 1. In the real world, our driver could be heavier or our car could be lighter, but the ratio will remain in the same order of magnitude. For your own situation, you can insert specific numbers into this model and you will see how much carbon saving there is. Note that we have only calculated the emissions reduction for a one-way journey, so you should double this to include the return trip. In other words, our carbon man for a two-way car journey is actually 50% full, meaning every day you drive to work, your car is emitting half your body weight in carbon pollution, not to mention other toxic tailpipe emissions. Just imagine. If this all sounds a bit utopian, well, that is not the aim. I don't expect anyone watching this video to sell their car and buy an e-scooter. Of course, there will always be a need for larger vehicles, like when you are travelling with your family, or doing the grocery shopping, or just when it's really bad weather. But ask yourself, do I really need 4 empty seats around me when I drive to work? Why not leave the car in the garage until the weekend, or for wet days, and use a more appropriately sized vehicle for Monday to Friday commutes? Okay, I hear you. Not everyone is a green warrior. So consider the other advantages of e-scooter ownership. No licensing or registration costs. No insurance premiums. No need to queue for petrol or gasoline. Minimal maintenance costs and no parking fees. And, last but not least, electric scooters are just plain fun to ride. When did you last get excited about driving to work? So it's time to return to our original question. Can e-scooters save the world? Well, no, not singularly, but then there is no single initiative that can do that. It's clear that a complex problem like climate change will not be fixed with a single silver bullet solution. Rather, it will require many initiatives and technologies working in concert to achieve the goal of net zero carbon emissions. If you have stayed till the end of this video, then thank you, and congratulations for having an above normal attention span. You will have learned these key points. Every time you drive to work, your car produces approximately half your body weight in carbon pollution. Using an e-scooter instead generates 1% of the emissions from a car. The cost of using an e-scooter is a fraction of the cost of a car. Every day you swap your car for an e-scooter, your carbon footprint reduces by an average 42 kilograms. This means over 1 year you would reduce your personal carbon emissions by nearly 10 tonnes. If just 5% of commuters around the world did the same, humanity would reduce its impact by 2.1 billion tonnes. Yes, that's billion with a B. So while e-scooters alone cannot save the planet, there is probably no easier change that individuals can make that would have such an enormous impact on the problem of climate change. The only thing preventing this revolution from happening right now is a lack of support from authorities to remove barriers to safe use of e-mobility devices. But these obstacles will soon be resolved and the way cleared for greater use of micromobility for first and last mile journeys. And when this happens, we can look forward to lower emissions, cleaner air, and lower congestion in our cities. What's not to like about this future? Just imagine.